Welcome back to another episode of the NCAA Cross Country Show. I'm your host, Gordon Mack, and today is going to be a fun day because today we're going to project who I think will be the 31 teams that will be going to Tallahassee about a week and a half from now. This upcoming weekend on Friday is the NCAA Regionals. We're going to have 9 regions across the country, throw it down. We're going to have 2 teams automatically qualify from each region for a total of 18 teams. And then there's going to be 13 at-large teams. And what we're going to do today is try to predict who those 13 at-large teams. Now, there's a whole process. If you've been following the NCAA for a while, you kind of know we call it the Kolas system. But there's different points, wins, losses. I don't really want to kind of explain the whole how you get selected process. But what I can tell you is it's a straight-up computer-like system. There's no subjectivity. There's no coaches being like, hey, what about my team or this team? Well, this was impressive. What about what I did last week? None of that. It's all about who you beat and who you lost to and where you finish at the regional. So I'll try to kind of explain the rules as we do a virtual selection per se. But, I'm talking too much. Let's just get right into it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to kind of go you step by step how a virtual selection would happen. And what we're going to do is FloTrack is going to pick how I think the 9 regions are going to play out, and then we'll take you through the process. Let's just get right into it. Here we go. So let's start with the men. Right here on the screen right now is I have a FloTrack projection of how we think the regionals will play out, the top 10 teams in order. So now this obviously isn't exactly what's going to happen. There's teams that are going to do better or worse than what we predict. But this is based off of coaches' rankings. This is based off of FloTrack rankings. In order to do this exercise, we got to just project how we think the regionals are going to finish because that's a starting point for selecting the team. So let's pretend these 9 regions happened. On the men's side, Notre Dame wins Great Lakes. Stanford men win the West. Ole Miss win the South, etc., etc. We get 18 teams right off the bat, and we're going to highlight them in green. So 18 teams are already in. They're the top 2 in every region. Those are the automatic qualifiers. Now, the next step is finding out who are the next teams to be considered to be selected because we got to add 13 more teams, a total of 13 more teams. So who are the 13 teams going to be? First, we have to find out what our pool is. And the pool is all of the 3rd and 4th place finishers in every region. So these 18 teams are all considered. So teams that finished 5th, no one is looking at you yet. Only teams that finished 3rd and 4th, those are the 18 teams that the committee is going to look at. And they're going to look at these 18 teams, Butler, Michigan, Villanova, Navy, Colorado, Air Force. And they're going to say, all right, who among these 18 teams has the most wins over teams that are already in the meet, aka the teams that are green? Well, it turns out Colorado, the 3rd place team in the Mountain region, they have a total of 12 wins. They've beaten 12 of the teams in green, and some of them they've beaten twice. If you beat a team twice, it counts as another win. So Colorado, they've beaten Texas, Stanford, Oregon, Arkansas, BYU, Notre Dame, Texas, Princeton, Alabama, Georgetown, Ole Miss, and Wake Forest. They've done it at pre-nets, at Pac-12s, and at the Cowboy Jamboree. So Colorado, you are the next team in with 12 wins. So we'll make you green. Now, because we let Colorado in, we're now going to consider Utah State now because you always want to look at the next 2 in every region. So now we have another group of 18 teams we're going to look at. We're going to look at these 18 teams and who here has the most wins among these teams that are in green. It is Florida State. So Florida State, where are you? Boom, boom, boom. You get in because you have 7 wins. Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgetown, Alabama, Georgetown, Ole Miss, Wake Forest, Florida State. You're in the meet as a 20th team selected. And because we do that, Middle Tennessee State is now a team that is potentially considered. So you get the idea. We're now going through this. Next team is Butler. They are the team with the next most wins. They have 6 wins. So we're going to highlight Butler here. Butler gets in here. Butler had 6 wins, one over Iona, Georgetown, Florida State, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgetown again. They get in with 6 wins, and because of that, Indiana now is a team that has a chance to get in. Next team, number 22, is Michigan. Michigan gets in. Now, Michigan actually has more wins than Butler. Michigan actually has 10 wins. But the reason why Butler gets in before Michigan is because Butler beat them at the regional. And you can't have a team leapfrog a team in. If they do, both of them got to go in. That's a push. We'll get to that later. But Butler could get on their own. Michigan can get in on their own. Michigan has 10 wins. They're the next team in. And now Michigan State is a team that can be considered. So, next team is Tulsa. Tulsa has 7 wins. Wisconsin, Oregon, Michigan, Furman, Harvard, Butler, and Iona. All at the Nutty Comb Invite. Tulsa, good thing you went to Wisconsin because that's where you got all your points. So Tulsa is now a team that is in. And because of that, Wichita State is now a team that is considered. Again, always got to have 18 teams being considered at one time. Next team in would be Air Force. Now, Air Force actually has this. Actually, here's an interesting thing. Air Force and Syracuse. Where's Air Force? Here, Air Force. Air Force, we'll make it orange, and Syracuse, orange. They actually both have the same amount of wins. They both have 6 wins. However, because Air Force beat Syracuse head-to-head, Air Force gets in before Syracuse. And again, you only let one in. You don't select them both at the same time. If there's a tie, in this case, both Air Force and Syracuse have 6 wins among the green teams. You got to break the tie because you can't let them both in. And when you break the tie, Air Force beats Syracuse head-to-head. Tiebreakers, right? First tiebreaker obviously is head-to-head. If you beat them, or if you play twice, then it's the most recent win. But in this case, Air Force beat Syracuse straight up. But it's head-to-head, and then there's common opponents, and then there's I don't know all the actual order of operations, but mainly head-to-head, and then common opponents is like the main bonus. Once you get through those two, you pretty much figured out your team. So Air Force would get in as green. Remember, this goes back to yellow because we haven't selected Syracuse yet. Southern Utah now becomes an eligible team because you always have to have 18 teams. And when you do the next team, the number 25 team is Gonzaga, the Zags. Dude, a team makes their first meet in forever long in 2020 or 2021. Now they're there to stay. Gonzaga in, which puts Boise State as now a team that is eligible to be selected. Now we get into it. Syracuse now finally gets in. They turn green. UMass Lowell now becomes a team eligible to be selected. Syracuse had 6 wins. Next, so Syracuse lost the tiebreaker to Gonzaga because Gonzaga beat Syracuse head-to-head. Now, number 27. Again, 31 teams get in. We're at number 27. The next team in is going to be North Carolina. North Carolina right here will turn them green. North Carolina had 5 wins over Syracuse, Butler, Iona, Princeton, and Florida State. That's 5 wins. They get in next, so that makes Duke a team that can potentially be selected. Again, always have to have, what's that? That's right, 18 teams eligible to be selected. The next one here is a team actually with the most wins among these 18 yellow teams is actually Boise State. Now, if you notice, Boise State is right here. In order for Boise State to go, though, Washington needs to go with them. And in fact, when you play out all of the simulations, there's no scenario where Washington, in this projection, there's no scenario where Washington has enough wins to get in. So therefore, because Washington is blocking Boise State, but Boise State is the best team among these 18 yellow teams, it's called a push. So what's going to happen here is Boise State is going to push in Washington. So that means Boise State's going to get in with a green, and Washington's going to go in, but Washington's going to go in with a little asterisk. So we'll make them red. They're in, but they have a red. Because Washington is getting pushed in, the teams are not allowed to get points off of a team off of Washington. So if Villanova had beaten Washington at a meet, it doesn't count as a win because Washington is kind of like this virtual team that gets in, that no one gets wins over. Washington gets to go to the meet, but you can't use your resume of beating the Huskies. Also, because of that, only one extra team will be added here as considered because you can only push in one team per region. So West is using the push on Washington. That means Portland is only the team left to be considered. Long story short, only 17 teams now can be considered in this next round because Boise State and Washington took up the 28th and 29th spot. So now we're down to our final two spots, the 30th spot. This is where it basically, the interesting things happen because, let's be honest, Colorado, whether they finish first, third, fourth, they're going in. They have so many wins. A lot of these top teams, it's all formality. But when you get to this 30, 31, and that cutoff at 32, that's where the question's going to happen. So here we go. The number 30th team in, the second to last team that's going to get in is Utah State. Utah State has 6 wins. Boise State, they beat Boise, they beat Harvard, they beat North Carolina, they beat Syracuse, they beat Butler, and they beat Iona. So Utah State, the, was that 5th team in the Mountain? They're going. And then the last team going with 7 wins is Southern Utah. They beat North Carolina, Syracuse, Butler, Iona. I should include, hold on. First of all, Colorado State is considered. But Southern Utah is going to get the spot. Actually, in this situation, once we're on the final round, you can't get 2 teams in. So because we're in the final round, we now need to turn all of the second teams off because they are not allowed to be considered because we only have 1 spot left. So now among these 9 teams, Southern Utah has the most wins. They got 7 wins. They got wins over North Carolina, Syracuse, Butler, Iona, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgetown. Now, Colorado State also had 7 wins, but obviously Southern Utah is going to win the tiebreaker over Colorado State because of regional finish. Portland also had a few wins, but they didn't have as many as Southern Utah. So Southern Utah has, like I said, 7. UNC, Syracuse, Butler, Iona, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgetown. The team that they're going up against really is Portland. Portland had Boise State, North Carolina, Syracuse, Butler, and Iona. So Portland really only had 5 wins. Southern Utah had 7, and 7 is greater than 5. Now, get this, though. Portland actually has beaten Southern Utah. They beat Southern Utah at Nuttycombe. But that doesn't matter because Southern Utah has 7 wins. Portland has 5. Even though Portland beat Southern Utah, doesn't matter because 7 is greater than 5. So that means Southern Utah gets to be the next team in and the final team in. And the next team that would have gone in would have been Colorado State. They are technically the bubble team in this situation. But you look at this results, and I think the big storyline that could happen is the Portland Pilots, a notorious cross-country program. I probably should have looked up how many straight years they have made this meet. It's a big number. I know that for a fact. And this will be interesting. Portland's on the bubble. Now, this is how I projected. So the question is, where could things kind of change? So ways for Colorado State to get in. Colorado State, hey, finish 6th or better, and you probably are going to make it because it's going to be hard to get 7 teams from one region. Villanova, you don't really have many points. You're going to need a top 2 finish to kind of secure a spot. Indiana, probably need to finish top 4, need to get pushed in by a Michigan or a Butler. North Texas, the only way you're getting in is top 2. NC State, the only way you're getting in is basically you got to beat a North Carolina or a Wake Forest because NC State doesn't have a lot of points. North Florida, same thing. You got no points. you got to basically upset a Florida State or an Alabama. Portland, you can get in. Basically, you got to finish top 5. That would be a very important thing. Or you need you need a little bit of chaos. And that chaos really can happen in the Northeast region. If you notice here, I put Iona as the winner of the Northeast region. But if you look at Iona's season, they've actually lost to a lot of teams. And they've given a lot of points out to pretty much everyone. And Iona could be a team that just has a bad day and finishes 4th. And if Iona finishes 4th, all of a sudden a lot of teams they all lose a point. And that can kind of change up the algorithm where we could see a team like Iona who's made multiple meets. They don't qualify, and a team like Portland get in. So it's kind of like a Portland-Iona, who's going to get in, who's not going to get in. So regions to watch, in my opinion, are the back half of the mountain, the middle part of the West with Portland, Boise State, Washington, and then Iona in the Northeast. What will Iona do? Will they be what I think they can be and be a top 2 team in the region, or will they fall off and get 4th or 3rd in their region and chaos happens? I mean, hell, Iona, if they were to, finish 3rd, then they still get in because Syracuse would push them in, but then Iona wouldn't count as a team. They get points. It's chaos. This is what we have. These are our projections for the men. So let's do the women. 17 minutes in plus, or 16 or 17 minutes in. Time for the women. This is going to be the longest NCAA cross-country show we have, but let's get right into it. It's time for the official final double boil and trouble projections for NCAA regionals. Okay, you guys learned the rules. We got 18 automatically qualified. Green, those are my teams that I have in. And then these are the 18 teams that are being considered, highlighted in yellow. And let's start selecting. Let's start selecting the 13 at large. No shocker here. The first team in is BYU, a team that can win the whole freaking thing. They have 9 wins over these green teams. They are in, and that makes NAU eligible to be selected. Next team in, we have a 3-way tie between Iowa State, Utah, and Wisconsin. They all have, in this situation, 7 wins. So, how do you break a 3-way tie? Well, it's pretty easy in this situation because Iowa State has beaten Wisconsin and Utah head-to-head. So, Iowa State gets the spot. So, Iowa State is in. They turn green. We now introduce Northwestern as an eligible team. These 2 teams turn back to yellow because it's time for a new round. And who's the next team in? Well, if that was a 3-way tie at the top, the odds are the 2nd and 3rd place finishers in that 3-way tie are likely to be the remaining teams, and that's true. Utah would get in next with 7 wins, and then Wisconsin would get in next with 7 wins. But remember, when we do that, Notre Dame and Weber State become eligible to be selected. Okay, time for the next team in, number 23 out of 31. It is going to be Ole Miss. Ole Miss, 6 wins. They beat Florida State, North Carolina, Arkansas, Georgetown, and then they beat Alabama twice. Once at the Northern Alabama Invite, and again at the SEC Championships. Ole Miss, you are getting in to the big dance. Just sell green. You're turning green. That's all that matters. Just got to turn green. Georgetown, next team allowed to be potentially selected. Number 24 team and the number 25 team. This is a situation where they're going in together, and kind of bullish on Toledo here. You notice I have Toledo beating Notre Dame. Coaches are ranking Toledo 4th in their region, so I'm going with it. And in this situation, Toledo, despite having no wins over any of these green teams, them beating Notre Dame is going to help them get in because Notre Dame is basically the best team among these 18 with 4 wins. So Notre Dame will go in. But remember, Toledo goes in as well, but they go in with an asterisk, meaning they get to go, but if Liberty or Tennessee or Oregon beat Toledo, it doesn't count because Toledo is a virtual team that's in. You don't get to get points off a team that's pushed in. So Notre Dame and Toledo are in. Next team with 5 wins is Butler. Butler, look at this. We are moving here. Butler gets in here. Again, Indiana is also eligible to be selected. Only one now is eligible to be selected in the Great Lakes because we already used the push, so you can't add 2 at a time. You only can add 1. Indiana, the next team. Butler, the next team in at 26. 27. So now this is what's interesting, the difference between the men and the women. When we got to like the latter part of the men's projections, we're always kind of breaking ties and debating between teams with 5 to 7-ish wins. When we get to this part for the women, we're dealing with teams with 3, 2, maybe even 1 win. So this is where tiebreakers and luck and just like, man, I hope the team I raced in October is getting in because I'm banking on these 2 teams or these 3 teams. In this situation, Oregon is the next team in with just 3 wins. They beat West Virginia at Nuttycombe, Washington and Stanford at Pac-12s. That's their 3 wins. Oregon, the number 27 team selected to the NCAA Championships, makes Portland now eligible to be selected. And now that Portland is eligible to be selected, Portland has 3 wins. They've beaten Oregon twice. They beat Oregon at Dillinger, they beat Oregon at Nuttycombe, and they beat West Virginia. That's 3 wins. And those 3 wins are more wins than any other team in yellow here. And Gonzaga is going to get pushed in. So similar to how Toledo got in, Gonzaga is going to get in. So Gonzaga gets pushed in by Portland, which is huge because basically Gonzaga and Toledo are basically taking up 2 of those valuable 13 at-large spots because we're projecting them having a big upset in their regional championship. So Portland gets in with 3 wins, and they push in Gonzaga, which puts now only San Francisco eligible to be selected. So now we only really have 16 teams in yellow because 2 pushes have been used. So time for the final 2 teams. We're on number 30 and 31. And get this. A lot of teams have 2 wins. Northern Arizona has 2 wins. Connecticut has 2 wins. Villanova has 2 wins. Liberty has 2 wins. Kentucky has 2 wins. Illinois has 2 wins. And Tennessee has 2 wins. We're talking about 7 teams here. All have 2 wins. But here's the thing. Northern Arizona, they haven't lost to any of those those group of 7. Northern Arizona wins the head-to-head against Connecticut, against Villanova, against Liberty, against Kentucky, against Illinois, and against Tennessee. So therefore, Northern Arizona women win that 7-way tiebreaker, and they get selected as the 30th team in. So they turn green. And now that we're down to our final selection, the 31st spot, we now automatically can eliminate Princeton, Rice, Kentucky, Georgia Tech, Northwestern, and Harvard from potentially being selected because we only can pick 1 team. Sorry, do this really quick. And this is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm not going to lie, and I'll tell you why. So we now have 9 teams for that final spot. Like it always is, 9 teams are always eligible for the final spot. And we basically end up having a 4-way tie. Is it, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4? No, excuse me, 5. 5-way tie for the final spot. And that 5-way tie is between Liberty, I'm drawing this out for dramatic purposes, Liberty, Illinois, Connecticut, what else we have? Villanova, and Tennessee. So these 5 teams all have 2 wins each. Liberty's beaten Georgetown and Michigan State. Tennessee has beaten Texas and Michigan State. I could go on. Illinois has beaten Notre Dame and Georgetown. Villanova has beaten Providence and Georgetown. Connecticut has beaten Syracuse and Providence. I think that's it. So you get the idea. So how do we break this tie? How do we break this 5-way tie where everyone has 2 wins? Well, Liberty wins head-to-head against Illinois. Liberty wins common opponents against Connecticut. Liberty wins common opponents against Villanova. But you know what Liberty doesn't do? Liberty does not win head-to-head against Tennessee because Tennessee beat Liberty at the Rory Griak Invitational, just barely. Beat them head-to-head. So Tennessee gets the final spot at the NCAA Championships if the meet ends this way. And one thing that's interesting about this, Tennessee, they have 2 wins. Michigan State at Roy Griak. Their win over Liberty helped them get this tiebreaker, but that doesn't. It's all it was a tiebreaker point. But their second point that got them into the tiebreaker situation in the first place, that put them to 2 wins, is a win over Texas. Tennessee beat Texas at pre-nats. And you're like, wait, Tennessee was at pre-nat? Texas was at? Well, that's right. They ran in the pre-nats open race. They ran not in the pre-national invitational. They ran in the second race, what people call the B race. There was a bunch of B teams, but there were a handful of A teams, Tennessee and Texas being one of them, 2 of them. And Tennessee beat Texas, so they get that extra win. So Tennessee is the last team in. Now Tennessee, they better pray that Texas gets that at-large spot here in the South Central Regional, because if Texas doesn't do that, then Tennessee's going to be out of it, and Liberty will be able to run away. So when we look at what does this mean, what should we be watching for? If you're a Liberty fan, you're a big Abilene Christian fan because you want Texas not to get an auto spot because that helps you defeat Tennessee when it comes to tiebreakers, and vice versa. If Tennessee fan, you want Texas to finish top 2 in the South Central. Also, if you are some of these other fans of like Utah State and Colorado State and Weber State, these other bubble teams, you kind of want Gonzaga and Toledo not to do well because they're taking up 2 extra spots. And those 2 extra spots could easily go to mountain teams. So if you're in the mountain region, if you're at NAU or Weber State, Utah State, Colorado State, cheer hard that Gonzaga and Toledo have bad days. And the rest of it is kind of, here and there. Again, if you're on the bubble, the last thing you want to see is teams get pushed in. Because when teams get pushed in, you lose out on a slot to qualify. But it's going to be wild, especially on this women's side. Like I said, there's 7-way ties. Then the last spot was between a 5-way tie where everyone had 2 wins. It's just incredible how the tiebreakers break out. But this is what we got. We are going to be doing a live show on Friday on the FloTrack podcast channel, not this channel. Like and subscribe this channel, but go over to the FloTrack podcast channel. Me and my boy Kevin Sully are going to be breaking down the regionals right after they happen on Friday. It's going to be a great show, and we will give our official, unofficial, because NCAA does their own little show like 48 hours later after everyone already knows who made it for the drama. I don't know. But we're going to actually get to it right away. We're going to do a live show, tell you who's in, tell you who's out, and tell you how they got in and how they got out. But it's going to be fun. Thanks for following. This is, I guess, we still have a few more cross-country shows because we'll do another show next week, previewing nationals. Then we'll probably do a recap show. So I ain't going anywhere. We still have a few more episodes of NCAA cross-country show season 1. Like, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on Friday.